We're going to start off with Cheryl Bledsaw and the Director of Emergency Communications, CCOM, everybody's favorite.
Good afternoon, Budget Committee and Commissioners. It's my honor to be here today to present the budget for Clackamas 911. We are a bit of a unique department because our budget is preliminarily reviewed by the police and fire agencies that we serve, as they are one of the prime funders of our budget in addition to the 911 tax. So I want to start off first with our list of accomplishments for 2020 in this rather historic year. I know you're hearing all about the multi-disasters that Clackamas County went through. From our accomplishments page, our basic sort of mission critical features are that we were 283,000 in incoming 911 and non-emergency calls that were received and processed. This was an overall call volume increase of 5% for this year over 2019 statistics. And it's also important to know that 16% of our total call volume, about 50,000 calls, occurred in 1 month during the September wildfires. Additionally to that, in terms of calls that were processed, when we dispatch a call for service, we had 222,000 of those in this past year. That actually reflected a 9% decrease over 2019. We saw emergency dispatches for police agencies go down approximately 10%, which was primarily due to the pandemic. We saw our fire responses go up by 29%, and our emergency medical service calls go down by 8%. So an overall decrease in calls for service of 9% for this past year. It is important to note that data is really strange for this last year, having 3 different declared disasters. So all the folks that we work with in terms of developing our budget say it's really important to look at the data almost in a bubble for 2020 because it was so unique and so different than any other year we've experienced in emergency services. From a staffing perspective, we hired 5 call takers. We promoted a supervisor and had 2 internal promotions for lead dispatcher and quality improvement coordinator. We also hired an EMS quality improvement coordinator as well. And so if you recall from last year at the budget cycle, I believe Mr. Feely asked us some questions about the quality improvement program. And this year we made great strides in doing all the prep work for getting a quality improvement program in place by hiring a quality assurance coordinator, by getting an EMS coordinator, and also doing a lot of the background to make our data more accessible, more transparent, and more easy to access so that when we get into quality improvement evaluation in this year, we will have some very solid data for you in your next budget cycle. From a training perspective, we certified 3 call takers and 3 dispatchers, and we were able to complete all of the required DPSST certification training for all of our dispatchers and call takers at CCOM, which was no small feat, given the fact that almost all training environments went virtual and our academies changed, and we had to make a lot of adjustments thanks to the pandemic. In terms of our service delivery, we added Aurora Fire as CCOM's 9th fire agency in July of 2020. And all of that work to get them prepared, get their maps into the system, and be able to dispatch for them was also a significant efficiency or additional service that we provided in the past year. From an efficiency standpoint, we also moved all of our fire departments onto one fire station alerting platform. We are now using the U.S. Digital Fire Station Alerting Platform, which was a consolidation of 5 different fire station alerting platforms. So in this county, we had actually deployed 5 different, each fire department kind of had their own fire station alerting protocol, and we moved all of our fire agencies onto one platform in this past year, saving money as well as being more efficient for our operational response. In terms of our agency-wide improvements, we made a significant number of improvements this year, which included making sure that all of our policies were accessible and put into a Power DMS system. This allows for increased accountability so that employees sign off on policies and are actually sign off that they are connected and understand them. We also made our employee personnel files much more transparent through the use of Guardian Tracker, which allows us to provide both recognition and corrective actions in a format that employees are able to see, acknowledge, and understand what is in their personnel file at all times. We upgraded the operations floor, so not only did we have to change the configuration of the furniture to make sure that we had 6 feet apart for all of our dispatchers and call takers, we also at the same time recarpeted, repainted, and changed out all the consoles during the 2020 year, which was phenomenal. We also we're one of the first 5 911 centers in the nation to develop remote-capable dispatch operations, which means that we are not facility dependent, and we were able to actually dispatch from outside our center. This was particularly important during the wildfire when we had to evacuate over to Washington County's 911 center because we were able to actually provide continuous dispatch and call taking operations during the wildfire, during the threat and dealing with the situation that the wildfires posed. But it was also important on Thanksgiving Day when 50% of my employees had to go into quarantine because of COVID, and we actually had to set up a quarantine center at the previous Oregon City Police Department in order that our folks that were under quarantine could dispatch from a separate location than our actual operations center. Beyond that, we also deployed 10 gig redundant fiber connectivity, which was really important during the wildfire because we lost one of our main 10 gig fiber lines, but we were able to not lose any level of 911 service during the wildfire itself. And then finally, we implemented our quality improvement program, and we're beginning to see strides and make improvements of evaluating our quality, be able to evaluate that the service we're providing meets the national standards and expectations. And finally, of course, we navigated 3 different disasters from COVID-19, the local wildfires, and significant power outages. So that was a fair amount of accomplishment for this past year. On to our next slide, please. In terms of performance Clackamas, there's a couple of stories I want to tell with regards to our outcomes. The first one is that our first performance measure is being staffed at 95%. If you've heard me present on any level of CCOM's history, you know that we have had epic understaffing, and this has been an issue for many years at CCOM. And so a couple of things that we did to change this over the last couple of years is that we split the workload expectation, because it used to be you would come in and be a dispatcher and a call taker at the same time. This created a really untenable high workload situation that decreased our ability to retain staff inside the CCOM environment. But over the last 2 years, we've implemented a call-taking entry-level position, and we have dispatchers, and they are separate workload configurations now. And that has actually allowed us to increase our retention rate from change our retention rate from 45% during training to 85% in training. And over the past 3 years, we've only lost 2 employees which have transitioned on to other agencies. And it's important to know that because a staffing study that we conducted 2 years ago indicated that we were on a path to lose 5 staff a year. And so losing only 2 in the past 3 years is rather phenomenal. In terms of so those are our first 2 benchmarks. We are in the process of getting 6 dedicated call takers, and we should achieve that this budget year. By 2023, the in-house quality improvement program, you will notice in the 2021 target, it says that 2% of our call volume was our goal, and that we met 1.5%. That is actually an error. Our goal should have been 1%, and we met 1.5% of call volume being assessed this year. It is our goal in the coming budget year to reach a 2% of all calls being assessed. That is approximately reviewing over 2,800 calls a year, scoring them, and providing feedback to employees. And so that's a pretty significant benchmark for us to reach, hopefully, in this next year. In 2025, we're to meet industry standards for call processing benchmarks. There's also an error in the 2021 target column here where it says 100% was our goal, and that will never be our goal. Our industry standard is actually to reach call volume. Our projected performance needs to reach 90%, needs to be processed within 105 seconds. And right now we are at 64.06 and 20.88%. And part of that is due in part to a cell filter that sits on our phone system, which adds about 7 to 12 seconds when an incoming caller calls from their cell phone. We ask them to either push a button or say something in order to make sure that it's not a pocket dial phone call. And so we are hopeful this year to remove that. This budget actually reflects the removal of our cell filter, and that should increase our call performance by approximately 7 to 12 seconds, getting us within national standards to meet for call taking and call processing standards. The other thing that is built into this is that we are not fully staffed according to the staffing study in order to have an appropriate number of dispatchers to meet the call volume and the population for Clackamas County. The staffing study in 2018 suggested that we actually need 9 more positions, and this budget reflects the addition of 2 positions. Our member agencies have supported adding 2 positions into our budget each year until we meet the anticipated number of staffing to meet the call volume and the geography here in Clackamas County. So due to both staffing as well as the cell filter, it's why we're not meeting the national standards that are set for our organization. And finally, significant upgrades being completed to our technology systems. We are going through a digital radio project this year, and we are anticipated to finish that. And then we'll be going through a phone refresh and a phone upgrade, hoping to add 2 features to the phone system. One is automatic callback for pocket dials, which means the system itself will call you back and said you accidentally called 911. Are you sure you wanted to do that? press 1 if you did, and it brings you back in, or if you don't answer, it sends you right back to a call taker. And then we also want to add in text integration. Right now, we deal with text to 911, but it's in a separate computer, and we want to integrate that into the phone system so that both voice and text are handled in the exact same phone configuration that we use inside the 911 center. So that is where we are for results of performance Clackamas. Should say any questions about those performance. In terms of our budget for this coming year, we have one program profile, so that is the next slide. We simply have all 911 services so interconnected that it's important to understand that it really is one program overall. We do everything to support the delivery and performance on 911. In terms of revenue and expenses, there's a few things that I'd like to highlight here. And our revenue and expenses, you will see that on the revenue side, there's federal, state, and local charges. There's revenue, and that revenue is a combination of both some federal grant funding through the Department of Homeland Security for technical improvements, as well as our U.S. Forest Service contract, as well as state revenue from the 911 tax. And so over the last 2 years, the 911 tax has gone up by 25 cents in both January of 2020 and January of 2021. So it is the first time in 20 years that the 911 tax was increased on all types of lines, voice over internet, regular landlines, cell phones. And so that revenue has gone up over the last year for us. And so we are still, we are using the most conservative projections to identify how much, but we do anticipate that our incoming revenue from here is going up to about, we went from 1.8 million to about 2.5 million, and we anticipate with this final increase, it's going to go to about 3.1 million. So that is most, a portion of where our revenue comes in. On the charges, fees, and license and permit fees, that is a shared cost between our fire services and our law services. And that is split on a formula base between 65% of those, the remaining amount of our budget is paid for by law enforcement because our call volume splits about 65-35 between law enforcement and fire. The additional 35% is split among the fire agencies. So both law and fire contribute the rest of our budget that is not covered by the 911 tax. So it's important to note that the only draw on the general fund in terms of ours is the contribution that the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office makes for 911 services. There is no additional draw from the direct county fund. In terms of the expenses, we are very personnel heavy. We have this budget reflects 55.8 positions from an increase of 53.8 over last year. And that is about 80% of our budget. The rest is materials and services. And then the other special line of special payments to other governments is what supports the technology that undergirds the 911 system. So we participate in 2 different regional constructs. One is the Metro Area Joint CAD system with Lake Oswego, Columbia, and Washington County. And we are on a shared computer-aided dispatch system, which is kind of the brains of our 911 center, if you will. And then we are also in the Portland Dispatch Center Consortium, which is 8 different dispatch centers that help support creating, we call it a CAD-to-CAD bus, that allows our centers to seamlessly share information without having to additionally call each other. And so the special payments to other governments goes to support those 2 technologies, as well as the technologies that support our CAD system. So that, the only other thing I wanted to point out, that actually those are, is just the materials and services are pretty nominal. Most of it supports our training and just our office supplies, but that is kind of our significant increase. In terms of the department summary by fund, you see our whole budget is 11.9 million. It represents a 6.5% increase, but not a 6.5% increase to our users. Because the monies were offset from the 901 tax, the actual increase to all of our user agencies is only 2.79%. And we always, our member board asks us to keep our budget increase between 4 to 6%. So we are very pleased to offer them a 2.79 increase this year in order to buy us the additional 2 positions, as well as to make some facility improvements and be able to make the technical improvements to our phone system that we're recommending. 2 other changes that are happening in our budget is we're increasing our overtime, but just slightly by about $20,000, and also increasing our contingency. If we learned any lesson from 2020, it's that our contingency line was a little bit short of what we anticipated for 3 national disasters, and our overtime was wildly off base for handling the issues related to this past year. So finally, in our significant policy and/or financial section, it's important to note that just for example, our overtime budget was about $450,000 for this year. We are estimating right now that at the end of the year, that's going to be about $725,000 that we expended due to the 3 disasters that we were involved in this past year. So there are some elements we are still working through the CARES funding and additional funding sources to seek reimbursements for some of those funds, but it's unlikely it's going to show up in our present budget year, which will likely show up. So when you're looking at our reserve for future expenditures and our fund balance lines, those are a bit decreased because we had to draw on both of those to make up for the overtime expended during the disaster scenarios this year. So with that, I'm open to any questions you might have.
Good, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Cheryl. Chair Smith.
Thank you, Cheryl. Where in your budget does it show the Sheriff's Department contribution of general fund?
So it is in the contribution from user fees. So the budget line, it'll say it's user fees, but it's everyone's.
What
So,
page?
Let me see, sorry.
Why not page 6?
If you're looking at the revenue circle, it's going to be on the charges, fees, licenses, and permit fees. And I can tell you exactly what their line item is.
I'm also looking at page 6, but it's all lumped together. I'd like to know what that amount is.
The very specific amount for us is, from the sheriff's office, is $3,076,693.
Okay. And has that been static over the years?
Yes, they have been the last several years. It reflects a 2.9% increase, although, let me tell you, because it's really based on population for law enforcement. And so let me tell you if that's an increase or decrease for them specifically. Let's see, Sheriff's Office, it's a 2.57 increase for the Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Regarding the 25-cent increase on the 911 tax, you said in the beginning that you were 9 people short and you have hired 2 more. Did that come from the 25 cents increase?
Comes from the budget overall, so we
Yes.
prepare the budget and then we present that to the member board, our executive board first. And
No, just, so, that's fine.
Yep.
My question is, where did you get the money to add 2 additional FTE?
both from the user fees and the 901 tax, so it's a combination of.
Okay, and, so, but you're still 7 short. So moving forward, what's your plan to fund the additional 7 FTE that you say that you need to be in compliance with federal standards?
So the member board has committed to funding 2 positions a year, and they have over the last 4 years. So this is the 5th year. We used to be 14, 15 positions behind. So they have committed to supporting an additional 2 FTE until we meet that goal of having there's 7 more positions after this budget that still need to be funded.
I understand that. Where does your money come from to pay for that?
From the user fees, so it
And
increases.
user fees,
Yep.
a combination of user fees and the 25 cents, and will that cover it?
It doesn't cover all 9. If I
Okay,
increased.
Or seven. So where do you anticipate getting the remainder?
By incremental increases over the next, each of the next years, because it will increase the costs over time, and
So
so.
you get an additional 2.5% from the sheriff's department
Yes.
per year, or last year, that's what it
Last year,
was.
this year.
Are you counting on that to go in to fund these additional positions, plus the 25 cents 911, and then you say user fees?
We will only, in this budget, only anticipate increasing by 2 positions, which will allow us to continue. So if we were to increase the number by the 7 positions, it would increase the user fees by about 3% per position that we add to the budget, beyond the difference of the 25-cent tax. So whenever we've added positions in the past, usually we've done a 6% increase, which allows us to buy 2 people. And so our member board, hasn't had the fiscal ability to be able to increase our budget by, that'd be 21% over the
Sure.
past year to be fully staffed at the staffing level we should have.
And your member board, they're confident that the user fees will come in, they're able to do that?
Yes, they commit to paying those each time when they approve, when they review and adopt the budget at the member board level in March.
Great, thank you very much, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Mr. Feely and then Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cheryl mentioned I had questions last year, and some of the information wasn't ready, but a couple months ago, she did send that to me, and I just wanted to thank her for doing that and remembering that I'd asked.
You're welcome.
Should I go?
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you. Wow, what a year. Thank you so much to you and all your staff for just awesome, awesome work, being
Thank
very
you.
nimble and adjusting to a lot of things being thrown at you, and also included this year with the ice storm
Yep.
also.
Commissioner Fisher, could you make sure you're speaking into the
Oh, yes.
microphone? Thank
So-
you.
I am curious if 988 is going to be a crisis line that is being planned for, that the FCC approved, that Oregon is planning for now. Do you expect any change to what you will be doing once that's fully operational?
So we're sitting on a number of different reform-based committees right now, trying to understand what the implications are to the infrastructure. It's very costly to stand up infrastructure like 988 to be similar to 911, just understanding all the implications of 911 technology. So we're looking at it from two perspectives. One, as additional mental health resources are dispatchable, adding those into the 911 environment, so we're not just looking at police, fire, ambulance as being the only three dispatchable sort of endpoints for folks that enter the system. And then where does the staffing come from for a 988 in terms of how we can be supportive? We're also looking at technologies in terms of providing what they call warm handoff, which allows us to send information if people call us first, but they intended to call other locations, how we can send that information so a caller doesn't have to repeat their story multiple times. So we're sitting on a number of different kind of emerging committees right now, and just trying to make sure that we're at the table so we understand how it will affect our business.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm sure there'll be more to come on that.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Cheryl. I had a question. I wanted to go back to the overtime piece, because I know the overtime this year was because of three major catastrophes that we had to deal with. But back in the day as well, because we didn't have enough employees working at the overtime, became problematic. So I guess I want to ask you, assuming that you're going to be staffing up to finally, this has been years in the making, more stable level, barring any other significant catastrophe, the word was that would always cut overtime, having it staffed adequately. I mean, again, if there's a major crisis again, that may, so is that the intent?
Yes, and
Will
so-
that be part of the savings?
Yeah,
eventually?
on months that we have not been in catastrophe, we have been trying to compare those to previous years, and so we are seeing a considerable decrease in overtime on what we would call normal months, if there is such a thing this past year. But we do anticipate that the addition of staff coming in decreases the need for overtime. That's still to say, though, there's a lot of overtime available. I think in almost all 911 environments, overtime's just a real thing that you have to deal with. So we're not sure yet what that base is that we can cut to that would be sort of a standard expectation. So we have consistently always budgeted somewhere between $350,000 to $600,000 in overtime, at least over the past 7 to 8 years that I've been looking at history related to that.
Okay, well, thank you, because it's a very complex thing to be able to do. I like the way you broke the system down to separate it out a little bit.
Commissioner Schrader,
because
I'm
it's-
sorry,
because
I can't hear you.
Because there's a lot of burnout, I think the way you changed the system has been a really good change. Because I do remember the turnover being very, very large, because it's just such an intense thing to be doing.
It is, and we've made a lot of improvements for wellness and just trying to make space for both mental health support, peer team support. We've got a community garden that we now encourage folks to participate in. And so we've really kind of, how do we shift that morale in such a way that we take all the emergency out of the environment that we can, so we're ready for the emergency that comes in on the phone or from the radio.
Thank you. Jan Lee?
Yes, now that the state has the seismic warning system set up, will that, one, create more work for you, or does it fit into your current work? And also in looking at future federal and state requirements for earthquake warnings, do you see, and if there is an earthquake, what kind of planning system needs to be in place to actually deal with an earthquake?
Sure. So I'm not entirely sure how the seismic warning system will impact us very specifically, but I will say that any type of alert and warning system always gives us spikes in 911 calls, because sometimes when alert and warning information is given to the public, if they don't have access immediately to answer their questions, they tend to call 911, almost as a reflex. And so we see spikes. We saw that during the wildfire when different evacuation notices went up. Our call volume almost mirrored whenever a notification was sent out to the public. So we certainly do have some curiosity about how that's going to impact us, but we see those types of call spikes anytime there's a significant crash on 205 or anywhere, anything that's happening in the community. In terms of earthquake preparedness, we're really focused at how do we keep 911 infrastructure resilient so that we can weather an earthquake. We've made some seismic improvements inside the facility to make sure that our technology is not jarred or taken off the beaten path, so to speak. And then we've also, this whole focus on remote dispatching allows us to have the capability to dispatch from anywhere. In my own head, I want to be able to go to a hotel ballroom and set up a 911 center in a really short amount of time, because we may not have access to the infrastructure at the location that we currently build it. So that's been our focus, to get more earthquake resilience, and I know that emergency management's likely working on kind of the community-wide response to earthquakes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. We thank you very much for your presentation today, and we just keep up the great work, because it's vital, obviously. It's amazing to hear just how many calls have come in and how the response time has been and everything. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all.